Hello. My name is Hazel Tisdale. And I was the girl on her knees at her sister's wedding scrubbing the floor while carrying her first child. My parents stood there, silent. My sister watched, amused. 300 guests laughed. They didn't know I had a ring on my finger, his ring. They didn't know I was already married to the man she was trying to steal. They erased my name from our family tree. Took my art, my voice, even tried to take my child. But what happens when the invisible daughter stops being quiet? Would you kneel? If it meant reclaiming everything they stole? Or would you finally stand up and make them remember your name? The Charleston air smelled of salt and magnolia as I stepped out of the cab, clutching the simple floral dress I'd ironed that morning. I'd picked it because it felt honest, soft yellow, modest neckline, nothing loud. My sister Seraphine never liked loud, she liked perfect. And this wedding, her wedding, was the grandest kind of perfect. The mansion glittered at the end of a cobblestone driveway, white columns and gold-trimmed doors like a magazine cover. For a second, I almost believed I could belong there. Then I saw my mother waiting by the gate. "Hazel," she said, her voice even but cold, "you didn't bring the right dress, did you?" I blinked, the Florida humidity clinging to my throat. "This is fine, Mom. It's clean, simple. It's cheap." She handed me a garment bag. "You'll wear this." I opened it. Inside was a pressed hotel-made uniform, navy blue, plain, starched stiff. I thought she was joking, but the way her lips tightened told me she wasn't. "Mom, I'm not staff. I'm a guest. I'm your daughter." "Not today," she said quietly. "You'll help where you can. Don't make a scene." The sound of her heels against the marble steps was the only answer I got as she walked back toward the mansion. I stood there for a long moment. I could have left right then, turned around, found a cafe somewhere, pretended this day never existed. But something in me, that stubborn part that still hoped my mother might look at me and see more than an inconvenience, made me stay. I went inside. The bridal suite was a perfume cloud of champagne and chatter. Seraphine sat by the window, her blonde hair curled into perfect waves, surrounded by bridesmaids who looked like they'd stepped out of an ad. She didn't turn when I entered. "Hazel, you made it," she said, eyes on her reflection. "Be a dear and check if the champagne's cold enough. Mom said you'd be helping." "Helping?" I forced a smile. "I came to support you, not to." Seraphine laughed lightly. "Oh, Hazel. Support is doing what's needed, not what's convenient." Then, like it was nothing, my mother appeared behind me holding a pair of scissors. "Turn around," she said. Before I could move, she snipped through the strap of my dress. "Let's not embarrass ourselves today," she murmured. Fabric slid from my shoulder like a defeated flag. Every word I wanted to say stuck in my throat. I changed into the uniform without speaking. The polyester scratched against my skin. I stared at myself in the mirror, a woman who looked like me but smaller, quieter, less visible. The reception hall sparkled with gold chandeliers and laughter. When I entered through the side door, no one noticed at first. Then the whispers started. "Wasn't that the artsy one?" a woman murmured near the bar. "Yeah. Thought she'd moved to New York. Guess not. She's serving now? How sad." I kept my head down, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. My name wasn't on the guest list displayed near the entrance. There was Mr. and Mrs. Cade, Miss Seraphine Wexley, even the Blight family table. But not me. I told myself it didn't matter. It was just paper, ink, a list that didn't define me. But when you've spent your whole life being the forgotten child, even paper can cut deep. Hours slipped by in a blur of polite smiles and aching feet. I tried not to look at the head table, where my mother sat glowing with pride. I told myself to stay invisible, do what needed to be done, and leave. But fate, or maybe humiliation, had other plans. Just before the toasts began, Seraphine raised her glass. Her laughter rang through the ballroom. Then, suddenly, the stem snapped, and her champagne spilled across the marble floor. Without missing a beat, she said, "Hazel. Clean that up, please. Right now." The music faded. 300 faces turned toward me. I froze, holding the tray like a shield. "Seraphine," I whispered, "you don't have to." She tilted her head, smile razor sharp. "It's fine. You're here to help, aren't you?" I felt my mother's eyes cut through me. "Do it, Hazel," she said softly. "Don't ruin your sister's night." The tray trembled in my hands. I set it down and knelt. The marble was cold under my knees. My belly, barely showing beneath the uniform, pressed against the fabric as I reached for a rag. The sound of snickering floated from somewhere behind me. "Didn't she used to paint or something?" someone whispered. "Now she's cleaning floors," another voice replied. Every second stretched, heavy as wet sand. I wanted to stand, to scream, to tell them all that I wasn't who they thought I was. But my throat burned with silence. When I was younger, I used to believe silence was strength, keeping peace meant keeping love. Tonight, it just felt like drowning. I focused on the spill. My hand shook as I dabbed at the golden liquid spreading over the floor. The smell of champagne mixed with humiliation. The laughter rose and fell like waves. In that blur, I remembered a moment years ago, me as a child, painting on the porch. My grandmother Matilda stood behind me, watching quietly. "They'll never see your worth until you show it to yourself," she'd said. Back then, I thought she meant art. Now I realized she meant survival. I swallowed the lump in my throat and kept cleaning. My hands moved slower, steadier. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Someone's heels clicked closer. The sound echoed like gunfire on the marble. Then a sharp pain bloomed in my side, a heel pressed against my ribcage, a shove I didn't expect. I gasped. My hand flew to my stomach. The room tilted. The music stopped completely this time. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then I heard laughter again, soft, nervous, pretending it hadn't happened. I stayed kneeling, breathing through the pain, tasting metal in my mouth. If they wouldn't see me, they would hear me one day. But not tonight. Not yet. My hand was still on my belly when I realized no one was coming. The sound of laughter filled the space again, cautious at first, then louder, as if the entire ballroom had agreed to pretend nothing had happened. I pushed myself off the cold floor slowly, my palms sticky with champagne and dust. My knees stung, my pride worse. The lights overhead flickered, casting gold across the marble. The chandelier sparkled like nothing had ever gone wrong here. I stood, straightened the cheap maid's uniform that stuck to my damp skin, and walked toward the kitchen. Every step echoed. Someone cleared their throat as I passed. A man whispered, "Guess she got what she deserved," to his date, who only smiled awkwardly. In the kitchen, the air was thick with steam and lemon cleaner. A line of waiters avoided looking at me, all except a young man stacking plates near the sink. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded once, too tired for words. I rinsed my hands, grabbed another tray, and forced myself back into motion. If I stopped moving, I might start crying, and crying was something I refused to let them have. When I stepped out again, the music had resumed. The crowd swayed, champagne flutes raised, laughter returning as if cruelty could be rinsed away with jazz. I walked the edges of the room, offering drinks to people who wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when I saw it. Against the far wall stood a massive display, an illuminated, Wexley-Cade family tree. It stretched from floor to ceiling, framed in oak, each name engraved on delicate gold leaves. At first, I felt a flicker of pride. It had been a family tradition, every major event, the tree was updated. I remembered my grandmother polishing the frame when I was little, smiling as she told me, "One day, your leaf will shine here too." I stepped closer. My heart beat faster. Seraphine's name appeared in 3 places: firstborn, heir, legacy. My parents' names gleamed above hers, joined by a golden ribbon edged with the words "forever bound." I traced down the lines with my eyes, searching for mine. Nothing. The space where my name used to be, a small brass leaf between my parents, was gone. Smoothed over, replaced by a decorative swirl. I blinked, thinking maybe I missed it. Maybe it was lower, smaller. But no. My leaf was gone. I whispered to myself, "I'm not even a branch to them." No one heard me. The music swelled. For a moment, I just stood there, my fingers grazing the frame like touching proof of my own disappearance. It wasn't just a name missing, it was the confirmation that I didn't exist in this family anymore. "Excuse me, miss?" A woman's voice broke my trance. A guest with too much perfume and diamonds like small suns pointed to the tray. "You're dripping on the carpet." I looked down. One of the glasses tilted slightly. "I'm sorry," I murmured, adjusting it. She frowned. "Well, be careful. That rug's imported." I smiled the way you do when smiling is the only safe response. Then I walked away, my pulse hammering behind my ears. I needed air. Outside the main hall, near the reception desk, another board caught my attention, a seating chart, ornate and printed in gold ink. My eyes darted over the list of names. Mr. and Mrs. Cade, Seraphine and Charles Wexley, the Blight family. Dozens of guests, business partners, old friends. No Hazel Tisdale. Just blank space. Looking for your seat, a voice asked behind me. I turned. It was a woman I vaguely recognized from church years ago. Oh, she looked at my uniform. Your staff, right? I didn't realize. Maybe you don't have one. I felt something snap, not loud, not visible, but inside. I guess not, I said quietly, and walked away before my voice broke. I found the restroom and locked the door behind me. The mirror showed a stranger. My face was pale, the bun at the back of my head lopsided, strands falling loose. I leaned closer and saw a smudge of foundation on the collar of the uniform, like I'd tried to cover who I was. It hadn't worked. Even makeup couldn't hide what they'd decided I should be. I turned on the faucet, washed my hands again, maybe for something to do. The water ran clear, then cloudy, then clear again. It felt like all the color was draining out of me. A muffled laugh drifted through the door, Seraphine's. I could tell her laugh anywhere. Light, rehearsed, like champagne bubbles that never burst. I closed my eyes. If I were a ghost, would they even notice? Maybe I'd already died in their world, and just hadn't realized it yet. Maybe this was the afterlife, watching people toast to love while pretending you never existed. Somewhere down the hall, a piano started playing. The melody was soft, tender, heartbreakingly beautiful. For a moment, I imagined my grandmother's fingers on the keys. She used to hum while cooking, saying music healed what words couldn't. I wished she were here now. She would have known what to say. The walls of the restroom felt closer than they should have. I pressed my palms against the cool tile, forcing myself to breathe evenly. My stomach tightened, a reminder that I wasn't just living for myself anymore. "You're okay," I whispered. "You're okay." I opened my eyes again. The woman in the mirror still didn't look like me, but she was steadier now, someone beginning to understand the cost of silence. The piano song ended, replaced by applause from the ballroom. The noise felt distant, like it belonged to another world. I straightened my posture, adjusted my collar, and stared at my reflection until my heartbeat slowed. Then came a knock on the door. "Hey," a man's voice called. "Staff only get 10 minutes break. You good in there?" I didn't answer. I just looked in the mirror and saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. The restroom door had gone quiet after that voice knocked, but the sound stayed inside my head. I stayed there, staring at the woman in the mirror, the stranger who wore my face. She looked like someone I'd seen at the edge of a nightmare, familiar but drained of color. I turned off the light, opened the door, and stepped back into the corridor. The air outside the restroom was cooler, yet heavier. I walked slowly down the hallway, listening to the echo of my shoes against the marble. The ballroom's music had shifted to something lighter, strings and piano mixing with laughter. From somewhere deeper in the house came the scent of roses and candle wax. It made me dizzy. I found a small service corridor that led to the back of the mansion, where crates of champagne were stacked like a wall between me and the world. I sat down behind them, hidden from view. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. I pressed a hand to my stomach, feeling the soft rhythm beneath my palm. "You're still with me," I whispered. Saying it out loud steadied me. Then, for the first time that night, I let my thoughts wander backward. 2 months earlier, I'd been sitting at my mother's kitchen table, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. Verena was slicing lemons, her movements precise, efficient. I'd told her about the pregnancy gently, trying to sound confident, hoping, naively, that she'd smile, that she'd soften for once. Instead, she dropped the knife into the sink with a clatter. "And who's the father, Hazel?" "You know him," I said carefully. "Dorian." Her eyebrows rose. "Dorian Vance? That man's name is in newspapers, not dinner tables. You expect me to believe he's involved with you?" "He loves me, Mom." She exhaled, long and sharp. "You've always been a dreamer. But this will ruin what's left of our family's reputation. We'll handle it quietly." "Handle what?" Her smile was thin. "I made an appointment for you. A reputable doctor. We'll take care of this before anyone finds out." At first, I didn't understand. Then my stomach turned cold. "You mean? It's for your own good," she interrupted. And for hours. I should have refused right then, but years of obedience pressed me down. I let her drive. She hummed softly to the radio as if nothing were wrong. When we pulled into the medical plaza, I tried to breathe. She placed a hand on mine, her nails digging slightly into my skin. Just go inside. Tell them your name. It'll be quick. Inside, the waiting room was sterile and too bright. A nurse handed me a clipboard without looking up. When I hesitated, she frowned. You're here for the procedure? The what? She blinked. Your mother said you requested a discreet termination. The word hit me like glass breaking. I dropped the clipboard and stumbled out of the office. I could hear my mother calling after me, calm as ever, saying we'd talk about it later. I didn't wait. I ran until my lungs hurt, until I reached the parking lot's far edge. When I finally caught my breath, I knew something had changed. Whatever small thread of trust I'd kept for her snapped that day. I came back to myself in that storage room behind the champagne crates, shaking, the memory flooding through me. I pressed both hands to my belly. I protected you once, I whispered to the child inside. No one will ever take you from me again. The words steadied me like an anchor. For a few minutes, I just sat there breathing, letting the rhythm of the air vents match my heartbeat. A faint sound broke through, a burst of applause from the ballroom. The program must have reached the gift presentation. I wiped my face with the edge of my sleeve, stood, and smoothed the wrinkles from my uniform. I didn't want to go back out there, but curiosity, or maybe pride, pushed me toward the door. I stepped into the corridor, following the voices. Through the open doorway, I saw a crowd gathered near the front hall where gifts were displayed. A tall easel stood at the center, holding a framed watercolor. For a heartbeat, I thought I was hallucinating. It was my painting, soft strokes of blue and gray, my mother's garden captured in morning light. But the signature at the bottom read S.W. Seraphine Wexley. My chest tightened. I'd given that painting to my parents months ago, hoping it might remind them of something gentle. I'd never signed it. I wanted it to be a gesture of love, not pride. Now it hung there, my work parading as my sister's personal tribute. Guests gushed over it. Seraphine, this is breathtaking, someone said. Such talent runs in your family. My sister smiled graciously, tilting her head just enough for the photographer. Thank you, she said. Art has always been a part of me. Part of her. I moved closer, my feet silent on the marble. The painting looked different under the chandelier's glare, brighter and colder. A man noticed me standing there and said kindly, "Oh, do you need to clean this area?" I nodded, though I wasn't holding a rag. I couldn't speak. My throat felt raw. It wasn't just theft, it was replacement. They hadn't erased me, they'd rewritten me. I turned away before anyone noticed the tremor in my hands. The kitchen door swung open as I pushed through, heat rushing over me again. The clatter of pots and chatter of servers filled the air. I spotted the rag I'd used earlier lying near a bucket. I picked it up, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my pocket. Not as a symbol of submission this time, but as something else. Proof. If they wanted me invisible, fine. But I would choose when they saw me again. I leaned against the counter, breathing deeply, feeling something unfamiliar settle in my chest, not rage, exactly, but a steady kind of certainty. For the first time, I understood that silence wasn't peace. It was permission. And I was done giving it. The ballroom's music swelled again. I stepped toward the door, feeling the rag's weight in my pocket. My reflection flickered in the glass panel, still in the uniform, still small in the scheme of their world, but not broken anymore. As I re-entered the room, the crowd parted slightly. Seraphine was at the center, radiant under the lights. She looked at me across the space, her smile wide, empty, flawless. Our eyes met. She hesitated for half a breath, then turned away like she'd forgotten my name. They didn't just overlook me. They had removed me, cut me out of the picture like a smudge in the corner of a perfect family portrait. I stood there in that uniform, a rag folded into my waistband like a flag of surrender, while Seraphine basked in adoration I'd never been allowed to feel. I didn't cry. Not anymore. The music picked up again, this time livelier, something jazzier to match the rising tempo of alcohol in everyone's veins. I grabbed a fresh tray of champagne flutes from the kitchen and made my way back into the ballroom. By now, the guests had softened. Shoulders loosened, conversations louder. Laughter came easily to them, like none of what had just happened held any weight. Near the head table, I saw my father raise his glass. He leaned into Seraphine with a smile reserved only for her. I used to count how many times a year he'd smile like that in my direction. I stopped counting after I turned 20. They stood beneath a massive floral arch, surrounded by gold and silver accents, exactly the kind of decoration Mom loved. It wasn't just a wedding. It was a branding event. Every flower was curated. Every laugh was practiced. As I approached the far corner, a man jostled his glass and spilled a splash of red wine onto the floor, just inches from Seraphine's dress. The music didn't even pause. "Oh no," she gasped, stepping back dramatically. "My train, someone." She looked around the room like she couldn't possibly imagine who should handle it. Then her eyes landed on me. "Hazel. Come wipe this before it stains my train." I stopped moving. For a moment, I wasn't sure if she was actually speaking to me, or just using me as another prop in her performance. Some guests turned to look. A few held their phones just a little higher, as if they didn't want to miss whatever was about to unfold. I looked at her, really looked at her, cascading curls, flawless makeup, the glint of diamonds at her ears. She had everything she wanted, and still, she wanted this moment too. To prove she could summon me with a single word. I hesitated. "Do it now, Hazel." That voice came sharp and from behind. My mother, Verena, standing just off stage with her arms crossed. She picked up a towel from a nearby chair and tossed it toward me. It landed at my feet with a soft thud. "Don't make this more difficult than it has to be." I didn't move at first. The weight of every pair of eyes in the room bore down on my shoulders like sandbags. My knees already ached from earlier. My back hurt from carrying a child that no one in this room even acknowledged. But I knelt anyway. The floor was cold, the marble unrelenting against my bones. I picked up the towel and began dabbing at the wine, which had already begun to pool near Seraphine's feet. I could hear someone laugh quietly. A woman muttered, "I wouldn't let my daughter behave like that in public." I kept my head down. "Careful," Seraphine said, still in that syrupy tone. "Don't smear it around. You're making it worse." My hand trembled slightly, but I kept wiping. The towel turned a dull rose color. The longer I stayed down there, the more invisible I became. I could feel my cheeks burn, not from embarrassment, but from the fight inside me to stay quiet. To not say the 100 things I wanted to scream. I stood slowly when the wine was gone. The towel hung limp in my hand, like a flag of defeat. "Thank you," Seraphine said lightly, turning back to the guests as though she'd just handed out a party favor. I walked away. Not quickly. Not with shame. But with the kind of stillness that comes right before thunder. By the time the speeches were set to begin, I had folded that same towel into a small square and tucked it back into my waistband. I found myself near the stage entrance where the event coordinator was handing out index cards to the family speakers. She glanced at me. "You're Hazel, right?" I nodded. "You're on the placeholder list. Verena said you might want to say a few words. If you're comfortable, you'll go on after Mr. Cade." I didn't expect it. Not from her. Not here. But something stirred, an opportunity, maybe, or a crack in the wall. I stood off stage as my father took the mic. He spoke of tradition, of legacy, of how proud he was to see his daughter married to a man who understood what it meant to uphold a family's name. When he finished, he handed the mic to the coordinator. She glanced at me. Before she could say my name, her earpiece buzzed. She nodded at whatever voice was on the other end. Then she stepped forward and said, "Actually, we're ahead of schedule. We'll move on to the bouquet toss." Just like that. The mic never reached my hand. I stood frozen, the card still clenched between my fingers. The back of it had curled from my grip, moisture from my palm soaking through the ink. From where I stood backstage, I watched Seraphine glide onto the stage, all smiles and practiced elegance. She spoke for 7 full minutes, about love, family, and legacy. About the strength of her mother. About how she hoped to raise her own children with the same values. Each word chipped away at me like wind against stone. When the applause started, I slipped away. Past the side tables. Past the stage. Toward the exit. I almost made it when I heard a woman near the bar murmur to her friend, "Poor thing. Still thinks she's family." I stopped. I didn't turn around right away. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just looked at my reflection in the glass doors ahead of me, shoulders squared, eyes tired but open. And for once, I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word, to Seraphine, to my mother, to anyone. I just reached behind me and adjusted the towel in my waistband, folding it like a soldier preparing for war. It wasn't a towel anymore. It was a line I was done crossing. I didn't wait for her reply. I had my own stage to claim. After slipping past the last set of guests near the exit, I circled the perimeter of the ballroom toward the display panels arranged under soft spotlights. It was something Seraphine insisted on, for a touch of legacy, as she told the wedding coordinator weeks ago when she was deciding whether to include a champagne wall or a wedding story showcase. Of course she chose both. I kept my pace even as someone near the dessert table whispered behind a hand, "Didn't know the staff were allowed back out after the incident." No one spoke directly to me, but I felt their eyes land and slide off me like I wasn't worthy of holding their attention for too long. The display stood near the stage, backed by silk curtains and framed in gold, pictures of Seraphine as a baby, in ballet, with our parents, on her college graduation day. My photo wasn't among them. I didn't expect it to be. But what I didn't expect was the sketch. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Pinned behind the floral arch on an artist's easel was a large paper canvas, a delicate pencil rendering of a gown. Layers of soft chiffon, floral detail at the waist, scalloped neckline with barely there sleeves. My signature style. My sketch. I stepped closer. My breath caught. It was the one I drew during a summer art residency my sophomore year. I'd sketched it in the courtyard of my dorm, inspired by the magnolia trees that bloomed too early that season. I never showed it to anyone, not even my instructor. I kept it tucked in a notebook, scanned a copy for my digital portfolio, and then forgot about it when life took a turn. And now, here it was. Framed. Displayed as part of Seraphine's bridal design journey. There, beneath the sketch, was a small brass plaque. Concept sketch by SW, the vision behind the dress. My skin went cold. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolled back through old photos in my Google Drive until I found it, dated, time-stamped, my name attached. Same lines. Same annotations. They took everything, I whispered, half to myself, half to the ghost of that version of me who still thought she might be seen for something more than her mistakes. This wasn't just forgetting me. This was taking what was mine and claiming it as theirs. I stared at the sketch a moment longer, then turned away from the spotlight and walked with purpose across the ballroom. Backstage, behind the platform where Seraphine would later make her third costume change of the night, I found my mother standing by a folding table, giving instructions to one of the younger servers. Her hand movements were clipped, precise, rehearsed. I waited until the server left, then stepped into her line of sight. "Where did you get that sketch?" She looked up, surprised to see me, then scanned my face and gave that tight-lipped expression she wore like a veil, calm disapproval. "I'm sorry," she said. "The gown design. Where did you get it?" I held up my phone, screen glowing. "Because I drew this in 2009. And it's hanging out there under her initials like she sketched it between meetings with her stylist." My mother didn't blink. "You drew that? Well, I must have forgotten. But honey, everything in this family belongs to this family." The words landed like a slap. Cold. Sharp. Practiced. "Even my ideas?" I asked. Her voice softened, just enough to carry through the narrow hallway. "Hazel, this isn't the time or place. You've always been emotional about these things. You know how people get when they feel left behind." "You mean stolen from?" Just then, two older guests passed by the curtain, catching a few words. They slowed. My mother noticed. In a blink, she shifted. Her tone changed. Her eyes welled up. "She's always felt left out," she said, turning slightly toward the eavesdropping couple. "It's been hard for her, being the one who never quite found her place. This is what grief does to her." I almost laughed at how easily it came to her. The tears. The tilt of her voice. The quiet tremble that suggested I was unraveling in front of her. "She's always been like this," she continued. "Sensitive. She misremembers things. It's not her fault." The couple offered tight smiles and walked on. My mother looked back at me with eyes that had gone cold again. I leaned in, lowering my voice. "If you drag my name through mud one more time, I swear I'll bring the whole facade down. And this time, I won't do it quietly." Her smile faltered, just slightly, but I caught it. That brief flicker of uncertainty. I turned and walked away before she could collect herself. My hands were shaking, but I didn't stop moving. As I rounded the corner of the stage, I passed Seraphine. She was posing with a group of guests, her laugh just a little too loud, her hand just a little too staged on her hip. She didn't look at me. But I looked at her and said, loud enough for the nearby photographer to hear, "Beautiful dress, sis. Almost like you designed it yourself." And then I kept walking. I didn't wait for her reply. I had my own stage to claim. I moved quickly through the side hallway, the path I knew well from ferrying trays in and out all evening. The noise from the ballroom rose behind me, laughter, clinking glasses, the soundtrack to their perfect lie. I ducked into the kitchen for a breath, for a moment alone, only to find something waiting that would light the fuse. A young server, barely 20, nervous eyes, flushed cheeks, stood near the sink, phone gripped tight in both hands. He looked up and froze when he saw me, like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. I was about to walk past him when he blurted, Hazel, right?" I paused. He turned the phone toward me, hesitating. "You need to see this." On the screen was a TikTok video, less than a minute long. There I was, on the ballroom floor, kneeling in my maid's uniform. The moment Seraphine had yelled my name. The champagne. The stain. The smirk. Then my voice, barely a whisper, but clear through the noise. "Don't kick me, I'm pregnant." The camera zoomed in just enough to catch my face as I recoiled. The caption read, "Bride's sister forced to kneel at her wedding while pregnant. Who is she?" Below, the comment count exploded. "Is this even legal? She looks terrified. Someone find her. That family's sick." The video had over 3 million views in less than 2 hours. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "How long has this been up?" "Since the first toast," he said. "It's everywhere now." I didn't say thank you. I didn't have to. I just nodded and walked out. And this time, I didn't slink around the edges. I walked right into the middle of the ballroom. The music hadn't stopped, but the conversations did. Not because they knew what I was about to do, but because for the first time, I moved like I belonged there. Not as help. Not as someone they'd erased. But as someone about to be seen. I headed straight for the legacy wall, Seraphine's shrine to herself. There, under glowing lights, hung photos of her childhood, family vacations, honors, charity galas, all carefully staged. A digital frame played her engagement reel on loop. I reached into the small clutch bag I'd stashed in the kitchen earlier and pulled out my phone. My hands didn't shake. I found the file and hit the button to airdrop. The screen at the center of the ballroom blinked once. Twice. Then it lit up with a new image. A marriage certificate. Hazel Tisdale. Dorian Vance. Dated 6 months ago. Legally signed. Witnessed. Sealed. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. I stepped back just enough to be seen clearly. "I didn't crash this wedding," I said, my voice steady. "I'm already married to the groom." The silence was deafening. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out my old sketchbook. The one I hadn't opened in months. Flipping through the pages, I stopped at the dress. My dress. The same design framed on the wedding story wall, the one they'd said Seraphine had drawn in creative collaboration. I held the book up and said, "She didn't design the dress." I did. Before she ever met him. Phones came out. Cameras turned. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." Seraphine's voice sliced through the noise. "This is a joke, right?" I looked at her. "No, sweetheart. That was your tribute to legacy, wasn't it?" People turned to stare. The crowd had shifted, leaning in, not to witness a bride, but to watch something real. Then, chaos. Footsteps. My mother pushing through the guests. "Hazel," she hissed. "What are you doing?" I didn't flinch. Verena reached for my arm like she could still control the narrative. Still tell me to behave. But before her hand met my sleeve, another voice cut through the room. "Who dares touch my wife?" The sound dropped the temperature in the ballroom. Dorian Vance stepped forward from the back entrance, flanked by 2 members of his personal security. He didn't yell. He didn't rush. He just walked, like every camera already belonged to him. He came to stand beside me, placing one hand gently on my back, and stared down my mother. "She's not your problem anymore," he said. "She never was. You just treated her like one." A flashbulb went off. Then another. The video crew, who had been there to document the cake cutting and first dance, were now focused on us. On the scandal. Verena backed away, eyes darting towards Seraphine, who stood frozen, her mouth open but silent. Dorian turned to the crowd. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone, he said. But when the woman I love is humiliated, erased, and lied about. He paused. I don't stay quiet. More phones came up. TikTok and Instagram would be flooded before the band played another note. I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there, letting the moment live. Letting them see me, not as a servant, or a mess, or the forgotten daughter, but as the wife of the man they'd all come to admire. And then I leaned in, whispering to Dorian so only he could hear. I told you I'd only speak when it mattered. He smiled, not for show, but because he knew I meant it. The expression on my mother's face didn't just crumble, it cracked in a way I had never seen before. Not the sharp, performative outrage she usually wielded like a blade, but something deeper. She looked uncertain. Unprepared. And that was new. The ballroom, once buzzing with polite chatter, was now in full-blown media chaos. The TikTok video, that video, had exploded. Someone said it had hit over 2 million views in an hour. Another whispered that local reporters were outside the estate already, waiting by the valet circle. People who used to only care about seating arrangements and signature cocktails were now huddled in clusters, eyes flicking between their phones and me. I stood beside Dorian, one hand on my belly. He didn't touch me, didn't whisper anything, just stood like stone next to me, silent but immovable. And in that silence, something even stronger bloomed inside me. Across the floor, Seraphine pointed at me, her cheeks blotched with anger and too much blush. She's lying, she yelled. This was planned. It's some PR stunt. She's not supposed to be here. The crowd didn't flinch. Phones stayed up. No one rushed to her defense. I didn't blink. Seraphine took a step forward, stuttering through her indignation. This is my day. You deserve the truth, I said flatly. And now you have it. From the edge of the room, Verena grabbed the microphone that was still live from the speeches. I knew that tone before she even opened her mouth. The theatrical tremble. The controlled breath. The well-timed pause. She deceived us all, Verena said, voice cracking ever so slightly. We've tried, God knows we've tried, to help her over the years. But Hazel, she's never been well. Not since college. There's always been a need to take attention, to distort things. People gasped. Some looked uncomfortable, unsure of what to believe. A few murmured to each other, their expressions flickering. She was never stable, Verena continued. We did what we could. That's when the moment shifted. A voice from the audience rang out, firm, clear, and devastatingly calm. Actually, that's not true. A woman stepped forward from near the back of the room. I recognized her immediately. Ms. Franklin. The notary who had witnessed our wedding. I was her attorney, she said, walking toward the front. I notarized their marriage certificate. I witnessed their vows. Everything you just heard? Fabricated. Verena turned to stone. I also have the original signed and sealed documents, Miss Franklin continued, removing a small folder from her bag. She handed it to the event coordinator, who looked between her, Verena, and me. Then, without ceremony, he placed the document on the projector and flipped the switch. My name. Dorian's. Our marriage date. Signature. Seal. It was all there, glowing on the ballroom wall for everyone to see. The silence was not quiet. It roared. Verena's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her hand rose slightly, as if to object, then dropped again. I walked toward her. My steps were steady. Measured. Not for drama, not for show. Just so she'd have to look me in the eye. When I stopped in front of her, she looked at me the way someone looks at a storm, like she hoped it might veer away at the last second. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just said, I begged for love. You gave me silence. I brought truth. You gave me shame. Now I give you nothing. Her lip trembled. For once, her expression wasn't performative. It was real. I turned before she could reply. She reached out, but her fingers only caught air. I kept walking. Behind me, the ballroom was unraveling. Guests talked, pointed. Some left. Others filmed. Seraphine had vanished from the center, her dress abandoned in the glow of scandal. I passed the dessert table. Someone called my name, I think it was one of my cousins. I didn't turn around. Outside, the press had already started forming a wall near the driveway. Dorian followed behind me, a few paces back, giving me space. When we reached the top of the stairs leading to the front entrance, a sea of cameras and microphones surged forward. I held up one hand. Just one. And the noise dulled. "This is over for me," I said calmly. "What comes next? That's for the world to decide." No tears. No victory speech. Just truth. I turned toward Dorian, but didn't speak. He didn't need me to. The flashing lights from the cameras bounced off the wet pavement outside the ballroom like a second storm had hit Charleston, only this one was made of questions and exposure. My feet hit the stone steps with the heaviness of someone who had carried too much for too long. Dorian was at my side, close but not crowding. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't need to. A woman near the press line shouted, "We love you, Hazel." I didn't smile. Not because I wasn't grateful. God knew I'd spent a lifetime wondering if I'd ever be seen, but because this wasn't about being loved by strangers. This was about no longer needing approval from the people who'd spent years erasing me. The cameras kept flashing, reporters throwing out questions, hoping for a headline. I let them echo unanswered behind me. For the first time in the entire night, I could breathe. We ducked into the side corridor of the estate, the back hallway used by staff, where they always sent me when they wanted me unseen. Now I walked there by choice. I wasn't hiding. I was stepping away from what I no longer belonged to. And then, they appeared. Verena and Ellison. My mother's heels echoed with that familiar, clipped rhythm, always 2 steps faster than anyone else's. My father's slower footsteps followed behind her like a reluctant shadow. She raised her hand, not to reach out, but to direct, as if this were a boardroom she still ran. "Let's not escalate this further," she said, eyes flicking to Dorian and then back to me. "We can fix the PR situation, but you have to stay quiet." It was surreal, how quickly she moved past denial, past defense, into corporate strategy. Dorian started to step forward, but I stopped him with a small motion. I wanted to speak for myself. "There's nothing left to fix," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. "The only thing broken was the story you kept telling people about who I was." She didn't blink. Just lowered her voice like she was the calm one. "You don't want to burn bridges, Hazel." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the rag. The same one they'd made me use to clean wine off marble. The same one they had thrown at my feet like a leash. I walked to the hallway table and laid it down gently, no drama, no flourish. "This," I said, "is the last thing I'll ever carry for you." My mother's lips parted, but she didn't speak. My father looked at the cloth like it was radioactive. I think in that moment, he finally saw it for what it really was, not a tool, not a towel, but a symbol of everything they had expected me to silently endure. We stepped past them without waiting for a response. In the quiet that followed, Dorian took something from his inner jacket pocket. "There's something you should have now." He handed me a small padded envelope. Inside was a letter, yellowed slightly at the edges, folded carefully. "I didn't open it," he said. "It came from the woman who used to work for your grandmother. Said she kept it until she felt the right moment had come." I opened it with fingers that trembled, not from fear, but reverence. Matilda's handwriting was instantly familiar. I'd recognize her cursive anywhere. "Hazel, if you're reading this, then I trust the world finally heard your voice. But just in case you forgot who you are, let me remind you. You are not their shame. You are not their mistake. You are the fire they couldn't control, so they tried to contain you in silence. Let them try. Because you, my darling, are the song they fear. Sing anyway." I didn't cry for pain. I cried for release. Tears welled in my eyes, not because I was broken, but because something in me had finally been let go. I tucked the letter into my purse carefully, like it was made of glass. We passed through the side of the estate, toward the front circle where the SUV waited. The driver had the door open. Just as I approached, another figure came into view. Seraphine. Her makeup was smudged, her hair no longer in place. The tiara that once sat perfectly on her head now hung askew, like it didn't belong there anymore. She stood alone near a fountain, away from the cameras, no admirers circling her. I didn't stop, but she stepped into my path. You stole him from me. Her voice wasn't angry. It was quiet. I met her eyes. No, I said, calm as I'd ever been. I just stopped hiding. She didn't respond. Just stood there, eyes glassy, mascara streaked. I walked past her. There was no final blow. No scream. Just a silence that wasn't mine this time. At the car, the door still open, I turned to take one last look at the house, the chandeliers, the carefully trimmed hedges, the walls that held generations of names, just not mine. You'll see me again, I said under my breath. But only when I invite you. And with that, I stepped into the car. Charleston faded behind us as dusk swallowed the skyline. The SUV windows blurred the rows of manicured estates and iron fences into streaks of orange and silver. Dorian sat beside me, hand resting gently over mine, but neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say about that place. We arrived in Asheville just after dark. The mountains welcomed us like an exhale, cooler air, pine trees stretching toward the stars, and a stillness that felt earned. Our new house wasn't grand. No columns, no marble. Just a modest two-bedroom tucked in the trees on a quiet street with cracked pavement and birdsong that greeted you each morning. When we stepped inside, I took off my shoes at the door. I didn't say it aloud, but the moment my bare feet touched the hardwood, I felt something give. The floor wasn't polished, not even, but it didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. That was enough. Dorian put my bag down by the entryway. I'll bring the rest in, he said softly. Leave it for tomorrow, I told him. We're here. He looked at me, truly looked, and nodded. I walked through the small living room, past the kitchen nook, and into the bedroom. The windows were cracked open slightly, letting in the scent of pine and damp leaves. I sat at the edge of the bed and breathed in, deep and slow. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. But it was peace. On the desk near the window sat a framed letter. My grandmother's handwriting glinted beneath the glass. The lines still echoed in my head. They will try to silence you. Let them try. You are the song they fear, Hazel. You always were. Beside the letter was a sketchbook, clean, untouched, a small white elastic band wrapped around its cover. I hadn't drawn anything since the wedding. Every time I'd picked up a pencil in the last few weeks, the ghosts of the ballroom returned, whispering all the things they thought I should have been. But this wasn't their space anymore. I slid the elastic off and opened to the first blank page. My pencil hovered. And then, without ceremony or fear, I began to draw. Not a dress. Not a face. Just lines at first. Swirls. Then a tree. Then a woman. Not me. Not quite. But close. For the first time in years, I didn't draw to be accepted. I drew because my hands remembered how to speak when my mouth could not. I finished the sketch, closed the book, and felt the ache in my chest shift, not disappear, but shift. Less sharp, more hollow. The next morning, while Dorian cooked scrambled eggs in a pan that still smelled new, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The chair creaked under me, the kind of sound that felt like a greeting. The sky was a pale gray. The kind that promised rain but didn't threaten it. I opened my tablet to check emails. One caught my eye, a news digest from a Charleston paper. I tapped the link. The headline read, Wexley wedding fallout continues, brand deals pulled, foundation under scrutiny. Seraphine's face appeared beneath the title, blurred, tired. A far cry from the staged perfection she used to craft online. The article mentioned several companies terminating contracts. An influencer management firm parted ways with her over public values misalignment. A second article mentioned Verena stepping down from 2 charity boards. Due to personal matters, the statement read. Ellison's name wasn't in either. Rumors swirled in smaller outlets that he had left the family estate and hadn't been seen at public events since. I closed the tablet. Not out of glee. I didn't take joy in their ruin. But I did feel something close to closure. Not revenge. Just stillness. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. Handwritten, thick envelope, Charleston return address. I opened it on the porch. Hazel. I didn't stop them. I failed you. I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to know, I see you now. Ellison. No apology. No excuses. Just an acknowledgement. The absence of denial. I read it twice. Then I folded it and placed it inside my grandmother's frame, behind her letter. They could sit together. One from someone who had always seen me. One from someone who finally did. Seeing me now, I whispered, doesn't erase when you chose to look away. Evening came slowly, the sky turning golden behind the mountains. I sat back in the porch rocker, one hand resting on my belly. It had grown. The life inside me felt stronger now. Like it had decided this body was a place worth staying in. I reached down, gently tracing the outline of the bump beneath my shirt. I promise, I whispered, you'll never wonder if you belong. You already do. The breeze shifted then, soft and cool, brushing against my face like a hand I remembered. A hand I missed. I closed my eyes. Not to forget. But to finally let go. They had written me out of their story. So I wrote my own. Sometimes, the greatest act of strength isn't shouting your pain, it's refusing to carry it any longer. Hazel's story reminds us that silence isn't always survival, and family doesn't always mean loyalty. Have you ever been the one they tried to erase? Tell us your story in the comments,